Welcome to this week's edition of Mob Talk. I'm Dave Stratweiser.
And I'm George Anastasia with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
George, sometimes they call it the mean streets of Philadelphia. This week we're calling it the snowy streets. But the snow won't stop Mob Talk, will it?
No, we're taking a look back, the 9th anniversary of a very infamous mob hit.
All right, George, 9 years ago this coming weekend, the murder of Raymond Long John Martorano.
Right, January 17th, 2002. He shot on his way to a doctor's appointment. He lingers and he dies on February 5th. One of the few hits during the reign of alleged mob boss Joe Ligambi, one of the unsolved murders I think the feds would like to put into an ongoing racketeering investigation. Yeah, but there's a backstory to this, and I think you've heard some of it. I've heard some
We're going to get to that, but this was a carefully planned out hit. He pulls out of his driveway at the rear of his home over near Fitzwater, makes his way up the block, gunmen open fire. He somehow drives himself around the corner up onto Spruce Street trying to get to the hospital.
Yeah, that was the most amazing thing, because when it first went down, he crashed his car into a fire hydrant outside the hospital. And originally there was some thought, where did this hit happen? Eventually the detectives traced it back to, in fact, his neighborhood. But it was an amazing feat when you think about it. This is a guy with a heart condition, with a pacemaker. He's shot and he drives about 7-8 blocks. And then he holds on for almost 2 weeks before he passes away. Guy. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, talk about this a little bit. 9 years. Yeah. This has been on the radar screen from the day it happened. Still no success in prosecuting anybody.
Yeah, I remember we heard conflicting reports about who was involved in the shooting. I think the consensus right now is there probably were 3 guys, a shooter, maybe 2 shooters, and a lookout, the way the ambush went down. But in terms of identifying who, I don't think either the Philadelphia police or the FBI has enough to make a case at this point.
No. Now, the reason supposedly behind this murder was that Long John had come out of jail, wanted to get his hands back on his piece of the gambling business, and the local guys, the wise guys, were not having any part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one motive, and I think it's probably a legitimate motive, but there was another story involved that goes all the way back to the Scarfo era that I hadn't thought about. You mentioned it not that long ago, that probably played a role in all of this, and it's basically vengeance. It's getting back at Martorano for what he did back in that day.
All right, so let's hash this out a little bit. It involves Nick the Crow Caramondi,
who I know very well.
Oh, you wrote a book about him.
Right.
Plug the book.
Right.
A little bit. And in the course of Caramondi deciding whether he was going to cooperate, apparently, from what we're hearing from sources, Martorano may have played some kind of role in convincing him or kind of pushing him over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, we got to go back and set the scene. Caramondi is involved in the attempted shakedown of Willard Rouse, the Pennsylvania development. Scarfo wanted $1 million. He gets jammed up and is in jail. Now, Caramondi, this is back in 1984, 1985. Caramondi knows Scarfo is a violent guy, and the only way Scarfo deals with problems is to eliminate the problem.
Right.
And he's in jail, and he's a little paranoid, and he's wondering about what's going to happen to him. Now, Long John is in there for the murder of roofer boss John McCullough and for drug dealing. He's an inmate, I think it was at Graterford. And in the yard, they talk, and Caramondi told me these stories.
They go for these little strolls.
Yeah, right. Yep. And Long John starts to tell Caramondi, you got a problem. And he does this. He says, you've got a problem. Now, whether that was true or not, we don't know. But Caramondi believed it to be true, and he called the FBI.
My sources, who were also in prison and visited that prison at the same time, separately from me knowing this from you, tell me the same story.
Yeah.
That they go out for a little walk on the yard, Martorano, and it was thought pushed him to the point where he decided to cooperate, and he's still, in some people's mind, to blame for that.
Yeah, and the other question is, why did Long John do this? And the answer is another backstory in terms of inside baseball, the Philadelphia mob. Long John's son, Georgie Martorano, was also convicted of meth dealing. And he was represented by Scarfo's good friend, the late Bobby Simone, the attorney.
Yes.
Georgie Martorano, facing a kingpin charge, decides to work a deal and plead guilty. He pleads guilty, and he's sentenced to life. Now, you would get life if you went to trial. And Long John sitting in prison saying, what happened here? And he blamed the late Bobby Simone and Scarfo for working out a deal that ultimately led to his son being sentenced to life in prison. That sentence, if you look at it, makes no sense. Yeah. If you're going to plead out, usually you get a deal.
Jail, right?
He's in jail for life. He's got the same sentence as if he had gone to trial, faced the jury, and fought the case. Didn't fight it. And I think Raymond Long John Martorano wanted revenge, and he used Caramondi to get revenge. That's
so
one of the
theories.
He
did pay back, and then it looks like the mob paid him back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly that. I mean, some guys out on the streets, and Ligambi was part of that Scarfo organization, remember what happened back then, and that might have been one of the reasons why Raymond Long John Martorano got killed.
All right, I'm going to switch it up on you a little bit. We observed an interesting conversation, my cameraman and I, Brian Zeli, this week. Anthony Nicodemo, a known soldier in the family, reputed soldier, sitting down to have a little chat with Joe Ligambi, Uncle Joe, the boss of the mob on his front steps.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes in the underworld. Nicodemo has already been identified by the New Jersey State Police, according to FBI information, as a suspected shooter in the Johnny Casasanto hit. Nicodemo is a major player in the organization.
Never been charged.
Never been charged. Ligambi is the alleged boss. I think the feds are still building that racketeering case that we've been hearing about, and I think as much as they want to poo-poo it out on the streets, the wise guys know it's coming, and you know, they got to get ready to deal with it.
Traditional Ligambi fashion, outside, anywhere where a microphone could pick up any sound or anything like that. Outside his home, Nicodemo comes to the home. They come out to sit out on the wall in front of his house. 20-minute conversation, all on tape.
Yeah, Gotti used to do this, called it a walk talk. You get outside, you walk around. You know, you're not in a location where it can be bugged, and that goes to, I guess, conscious security or paranoia, one or the other.
All right. And down the road, pictures like that shows an association, correct?
If you get a racketeering case, those kind of photos, that kind of surveillance is going to end up in front of a jury, absolutely.
All right, George, a little underworld tidbit to close this out this week. We have reports of a high-ranking mobster who likes to bag up his trash and dump it behind a very popular night spot in South Philadelphia early in the morning. What do you think about that?
Well, either he doesn't have a shredding machine or he's doubly paranoid and doesn't want the feds to know what it is that he's throwing out, even if it's shredded.
All right, well, we'll do a little homework, and maybe we can verify this story and talk about who it is in a coming episode.
More to come.
There you go. That's it for Mob Talk this week. We'll see you next week.